Hi, I'm Mona Irvin, board member of the Maine Coalition to Fight Prostate Cancer. Although this is our 6th video, this is the first time we have guests from both the prostate cancer and breast cancer communities. We have long understood that there are many similarities between breast cancer and prostate cancer, and we thought that today we would begin to explore the similarities as well as the differences. We know that in 30 minutes we can only begin, and we hope that in the future we will be able to discuss the issues in greater depth. Let me begin by introducing our guests. To my right is Terry Kungle. Good evening, Terry. He is the President and Chief Executive Officer of the Maine Coalition to Fight Prostate Cancer. To his right is Meredith Strang Burgess, a former representative in the Maine State Legislature and activist. Working with the Maine Cancer Foundation, she initiated the first annual Cure Breast Cancer for Me luncheon in 2002, and over the years has raised over $1 million from this event alone. Thank you, Meredith. Thank you. To my left is Al Fitzmaurice, a prostate cancer survivor and a member of the board of the Maine Coalition to Fight Prostate Cancer. And to his left is Samantha Wilkerson, the park manager at Reed State Park and a recent breast cancer survivor. I want to emphasize that we believe that the importance of screening for both breast cancer and prostate cancer is very, very important. Women should request mammograms and men should request PSA screenings. It is your right to know what is going on in your bodies so that you can make informed decisions about your health. You can find more information as well as our past videos on our website, www.mcfpc.org. But please remember that we are only providing information, not medical advice. I'd like to begin by asking Al the first question. Al, could you please give us a bit of your background and then where you see similarities between breast cancer and prostate cancer?
Certainly. I was actually diagnosed just about 2 years ago this month, and was like anyone else that's diagnosed with any form of cancer, was really taken back. In fact, I was training for a triathlon at the time and completely stopped everything. Once the diagnosis was in, I gave it some thought and opted to begin with hormone therapy, which lasted about 6 months, followed by radiation, external radiation therapy, and that was 5 weeks, 5 days a week, and then ended up with brachytherapy. And from there, you know, it just certainly we understand that for men and women both, the C word impacts our lives terrifically, with breast cancer and prostate cancer as well. Unfortunately, the numbers are very similar, and they seem to keep growing, especially in the state of Maine. In 2013, it's expected that there'll be somewhere in the area of 1,400 diagnoses for prostate cancer, as well as nearly 1,200 breast cancer diagnoses. And these numbers approach 250,000 nationally on both with both cancers. So the cancers are close in terms of their control of sex hormones. The male hormone obviously is testosterone, which stimulates cancer, and the female hormone estrogen also stimulates the growth in breast cancer, especially in women who are premenopausal. Also, the science shows that the linkages between breast cancer and prostate cancer are close in hereditary forms, especially involving the BRCA1 and BRCA2 genes.
So there are definite linkages between the two. The numbers are significantly on the rise. They're both driven by sex hormones, and in both cases there is a hereditary link. Thank you, Al. Samantha, you're our recent diagnosee and survivor as well. Could you give us a little bit about your background?
Yes, I was diagnosed just about a year ago, and I finished up chemo and radiation treatment just before Christmas.
What a wonderful gift.
Yeah, absolutely. When I was diagnosed, there was an initial bit of confusion. I never felt a lump. I never felt anything wrong. I went for my annual mammogram. They didn't like it. I got the dreaded callback. That was followed up by a biopsy, which was 10 days later. It seemed like an eternity. And after the biopsy, I hovered by the phone for days, just waiting for the call. Finally, on Friday afternoon at 4 o'clock, I couldn't take it anymore. I called my doctor's office and said, I was sobbing, what's up? And the friendly receptionist said, oh, your results came back, everything's fine, you're negative, have a good weekend. So I did, but I kept my appointment with the surgical oncologist with whom you get set up as soon as you, right from the biopsy, just in case things go bad. So I had questions, I kept my appointment with him, and I went into his little office on Monday morning and with my husband, and he came in and introduced himself, but with very little preamble, said, unfortunately, what your doctor's office didn't realize was that there was one chunk of tumor still left at the lab, and that one was the kicker. It was, in fact, positive for breast cancer, and he was sorry to inform me, wow. So after that initial bit of chaos and confusion, I really have to say that I think my treatment was top-notch. I was surrounded by some extremely great caregivers, and the doctors and nurses throughout chemo and radiation were wonderful. I had a say in my treatment. My husband had a say in my treatment. My questions were answered with science. They were answered with compassion. And it's very individual, when you get diagnosed with cancer. Everybody's story is so different. And I think prior to 1985, we didn't really talk too much about what it's like to survive cancer. And now I think the numbers are something on the order of 14 million people, 14 million cancer survivors in this country.
Isn't that wonderful?
It is wonderful, and nobody's tale is the same. The treatments are also individual, right down to, I know a woman who used to say she enjoyed going to see the doctor and nurses because every time she walked in, they gave her big hugs. And thankfully, I'm not really the same way, and thankfully my treatment people did not do that. So everybody's needs are so individual. And
that's true. Your needs are individual, and your treatment is individualized.
Right.
How you react to survivorship is individual. And that sort of gets us to Terry, because Terry, you have a unique situation. Your grandfather was diagnosed and died of prostate cancer, your father the same, and now you have been diagnosed and are dealing with prostate cancer. Give us a little bit of information about how all of this has impacted you and the choices in your life.
Well, first I would say there's clear a genetic link, and that BRCA1, BRCA2 is something that really does link the breast and prostate cancer communities. The thing with my grandfather was he was diagnosed back in 1964, and that was a period before we were doing any screening, and at that juncture, close to 50% of the men were presenting with incurable cancer. So the folks that are trying to take us in the direction of stopping screening, we've sort of already been there and we know what happens. And 50% of the men were dying from prostate cancer. So that's really not a place we want to go. But I would say that in terms of my own experience, because of that genetic link, and anybody who has a family history, I really would encourage folks to be very diligent about doing the screening, because we are at risk. And I would say that one of the things that I think really happens to all of us when we do get the cancer diagnosis is it really does change your priorities. And when we're working in the different support groups, you know, one of the questions is this sort of a bump in the road or a fork in the road? And I think for many of us, it really turns out to be a fork in the road, and we're in a different place and space than we would have been without the cancer diagnosis.
Absolutely. Meredith, you have a unique story as well. You were a young mother with young children when you were diagnosed, and you are among the millions of survivors here today. Could you give us a bit of your background and your experiences concerning your survivorship of breast cancer?
Sure, and thanks, Mona, and thank you folks for pulling this wonderful conversation together. It is a really critical conversation, and our cancers are very connected in that we all have sort of a different treatment plan, but at the same time, the process is the same. My story is like so many others, but I think, Sam, you said it so well, that everybody's journey, their cancer journey, is a little unique. I had the opposite situation from Sam in that I had about a golf ball sized lump in my breast that was basically sticking out of my chest, but yet my mammograms were completely normal. And I think a lot of younger women have a challenge to get doctors to pay attention to them. And it's one of those things, and I think, Al, you said it too. I mean, you've really got to listen to your own body and listen to yourself and advocate for yourself. In the screening, which is so critical, there's a lot of controversy around breast cancer screening or breast health, and also prostate screening.
And cervical.
And cervical. I mean, this is all under conversation. We actually had a bill in the legislature this past session that dealt with sort of the mammography issue, that density, younger women have denser breasts. So there isn't, we talk about everybody having a mammogram at 40 plus. In fact, it's not necessarily 40. Some women might have a very effective mammogram at 30, and others that are in their 50s, their mammograms would be ineffective because they're...
Excuse me, the same thing is with prostate cancer. There can be many what they call false negatives.
The false negatives,
positives.
right.
And that's something that the medical community and the individual patient has to deal with. And that presents another major issue for the patient as, do I have the cancer or don't I have the cancer?
Right.
Do I go get a second opinion and find out I do have cancer, or do I let it lie and rest at ease? So that's a major issue.
The second opinion issue is a big conversation, and that used to be in the state of Maine. People went to Boston or some other place, but now thanks to technology, our slides can travel and do wonderful things.
Absolutely.
But families are
Well,
such a
we've
part.
got some great resources here in Maine, too.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Well, now you can stay right here.
Yeah.
People don't have to travel. I think a lot of people think, oh, you run out of state. No, we're doing
We've got
great
some
right here.
resources here in
We
Maine.
do.
We do. We're very, very fortunate here in Maine. Now, one of the issues that was briefly touched upon was the strength of friendships. Sam mentioned it, that when she went to the doctor's office, they were caring and loving and compassionate. And we're hopeful that everyone gets to have that same kind of experience, whether from the physicians, the support staff, families, and friends. Is there a function? Al, how about you? Is there a function or a use for support groups?
Oh, absolutely. The prostate support groups that we have, several throughout the state, are very functional in terms of their support, their discussions about sexual, the loss of sexual activity, intimacy, and certainly family support as well. They tried, the prostate support groups really try to encompass the partners, the families, the wife, the children, anyone who's willing, and even friends, anyone who's willing to participate in the support of the patient.
That's wonderful. Now, Meredith, you've been extremely active in the breast cancer community. You were responsible for the luncheon that we mentioned in the opening. You also were the prime motivator and mover behind the pink ribbon breast cancer license plate. Is there as strong a support system for women in the breast cancer community as there is in the prostate cancer community?
Let me just jump in and say
Okay,
that
Terry,
Meredith
yes.
has done, I mean, you've done an enormous amount for breast, but she has been one of the most effective voices in the legislature for trying to do all
All
cancer.
cancers,
So
right.
Wonderful.
you've been absolutely phenomenal on that. So.
Well, thanks, Terry. There's a chorus out there. In anybody in the state of Maine, we have some fabulous resources up here. And we've all touched on it. It's an individual decision. And I know tons of folks who absolutely love the support groups. And there's groups all over the state of Maine. And people can check in with their local medical associations and hospitals and find out where they are in their particular area. But it's really wonderful. But just as many people really don't want to go into the support group, or they don't know how it really is. So, but anybody that's diagnosed, we always encourage everybody, talk to someone who's been there and done that. And maybe got the t-shirt. I have a t-shirt and it says, yes, these are fake, my real ones tried to kill me. And whenever I pull it out and wear it at any of these different events around the state, it's fodder for some fabulous conversations. But these support groups are great, but the individuals, the Cancer Community Center, when I was diagnosed, there really wasn't a process for a buddy or to be able to connect to someone, even though I feel like in some days everybody I meet has cancer. People get diagnosed with cancer and all of a sudden don't know what to do. They don't know anybody who's had cancer or know anybody well enough to have that conversation. So the Cancer Community Center started the Buddy to Buddy program, which is wonderful in that they now have a sort of a catalog, you will, of all the different kinds of cancer, and you can call up and they can actually match you one-on-one. And you can do whatever you want to do. I just want to have one phone conversation, or I want to meet this person, or I want to have an ongoing conversation, and that's totally up to you. In the breast cancers community, we have a number of resources. There's the Maine Breast Cancer Coalition, who has a patient support fund, and it's the only fund I know of. Actually, in many states don't have this. This is an independent organization here in Maine, and it's about financial. You know, there's the medical portion of what we all go through, and then there's the life portion, which is it definitely changes your life. It maybe in some cases makes it so you can't go to work for a few months or 6 months. You maybe have to travel long distances like we do in Maine for treatment. So it's a fund that you can apply to and literally get $800 to help you with your oil bill that winter. And it's a wonderful program. The license plate program that's out there funds 3 different programs in the state of Maine. So we sort of have the different ends of cancer. And it's the Maine Breast Cancer Coalition is the real active part. And then we have the Maine Breast and Cervical Health Program, which has mammograms for underinsured or uninsured women. And then the Maine Cancer Foundation.
Fantastic. We're very fortunate. Terry, now you lead 2 support groups.
Yeah.
We don't do in the prostate cancer world quite as much as the breast cancer folks do, but
No, we envy the breast cancer.
I know.
folks.
I know. And we try to help.
We hope
we work
to get as good
together,
as the breast
and
cancer.
we can learn from one another. We can collaborate. We can cooperate. Tell us a little bit about the prostate cancer support groups.
Well, I would just sort of finish off your last question. I think that for both the breast and the prostate cancer community, these are difficult diseases, and one of the things I think all of us try to encourage is don't make it worse by trying to do it all alone. So, you know, if you don't like support groups, we've got phone support, but there's a huge community in terms of both breast and prostate cancer survivors that are there to help, and I think all of us are here because we went through a pretty tough journey, and what the support groups and all the folks that are here are trying to do is to make that journey for the newly diagnosed a lot easier than sort of what we went through. The 2 different support groups that I lead really get into, you know, some of the medical journey issues. But one of the things that we're increasingly trying to focus on as well is there's also this emotional journey. And for breast cancer and prostate cancer, we've got cancer, but then we've got all these side effects that really go to the issue of, am I really a woman, am I really a man? So, you know, these are things that we do try to help support folks with, and I think we're trying to do a better job of helping folks through that. The other thing that the Prostate Cancer Coalition is doing, though, is there is in prostate cancer a big issue of overtreatment. Close to 25 to 30% of men that get diagnosed with prostate cancer do in fact die. But the problem that we have is approximately today 90% of men, when they hear prostate cancer, some of them go out and make a rushed fear-based decision, and we have 90% being treated. One of the things that the Maine Coalition has been working hard to do is for those men that appear to have non-aggressive cancer, that they get involved with active surveillance if their doctors tell them that that's a valid option. But for those that do active surveillance, they're able to postpone and sort of kick the can down the field in terms of any of these side effects. So we're hopeful that we can get more people involved in active surveillance.
Well, I understand all that, and it's very important. And I did remember when I was reading Samantha's bio that she talked a lot about the survivorship issue, and that once your treatment is over and you no longer see the doctor, the surgeon, the oncologist, the support staff, the PT people, that all of a sudden you're done. Where do you go? What do you do? Your days are completely different. Anybody, please feel, Al, anyone, jump in and give us a little bit of information about how you deal with this sudden emptiness of surviving.
Well, on one hand, you're thrilled. I mean, it's over. You're ecstatic. You're beside yourself. There's celebrations. Your friends make you cakes. But at the same time, your life has been taken over for the prior year, sometimes in some cases longer than that, and you live by your appointments. You know, you kind of duck your head and go through it, and it's week to week. You know, chemotherapy is every week or every 2 weeks, and radiation is every day, and it's a very routine, structured thing. You go to the treatment center, and then when you're done, it's so nice not to have to be part of that cycle anymore, but at the same time, you forget what normal is. You realize that you've slept through a lot. You may have a lot of side effects that are still, you know, holding over. Your brain may be foggy. You may be depressed. You may be overwhelmed by fears of recurrence.
Right into what Terry was discussing.
Absolutely.
As far as the emotional journey.
Yeah.
It's very, very important that beyond the actual treatment, we need to examine the issues, not just of the physical side effects, but the emotional side effects as well.
I think
Go ahead.
I think it's important to remember it wasn't just me that was diagnosed. It was Ralph that was diagnosed too, and my friends and my mom and my family and my loved ones. And I was fortunate. I knew breast cancer survivors. Some of them were neighbors, some of them were friends. There were way too many of them. But they came out of the woodwork to rally around me. And not that Ralph was really left out in the cold, but it would have been nice if he could have had the same sort of automatic support just individually. He didn't seek out support groups, neither did I really, but there were many times where I felt, geez, I wish somebody would come and talk to him and see, and my mom and my loved ones. They're going through it with you.
Now, Al, in your bio also, you mentioned that same situation, that in the prostate cancer support groups, every single one of the 14, I believe, that we have throughout the state of Maine, men and their partners, their friends, their neighbors, as you said, are welcomed. And you find that valuable?
The more people that we can get to a support group for the patient, the better. We encourage, you know, bring the whole neighborhood if you want to. And we feel that as a facilitator, I can see where it actually has so many more advantages than an exclusive support group. And I think, you know, the Breast Cancer Society has a tendency to be exclusive in terms of not having that many of, you know, friends and family and partners and so on and so forth in the support groups, which obviously we would look, you know, we certainly encourage. And we found that what If we could redefine support group, I think it would be advantageous to us to be able to get the word out there, simply because we're not there to engage the patient. We're just there to facilitate a group that wants to talk about where they've been, what they've done, and how far they've come, some of their experiences and so forth. That's a real support group. That's how it happens.
And that sharing is the critical piece, because
Absolutely.
everybody's got their own experience, but when you can sort of connect with other folks, that's huge.
Yeah, and and I have the ongoing interesting challenge. A lot of people kind of come up to me and they'll go, "How come everything you do is for pink things?" And I'm like, "Come on, really? It's not." It may feel like that, and initially I think you do get kind of wrapped up in sort of your own situation, and then you mature and realize that there's a whole issue out there, and you attack that. My biggest challenge is getting the guys to talk to each other.
We're just supposed to man up,
Well,
That's all we have to do. We just man up.
but the whole thing was back, into the 80s or so. In fact, I'm trying to remember when it was. It was actually in the 90s that in the Portland Press Herald, in obituaries, they actually had a paper policy, at the paper that said, if someone died of cancer, for a while it just said, they died of a disease or something.
Yeah.
And then finally, and then they finally got so they would talk about cancer. And it wasn't until, and I know the individual story of, there was an individual who passed away from breast cancer, and her family was like, you know what, you will say that she died of breast cancer. And they're like, oh, we can't say the word breast, da, da. It's like, no, he really wanted in there because it was important he wanted others to see that breast cancer is killing people. And now, of course, people put these things in all the time, but it's really a critical piece. And the support groups are for everybody. And there are some that are just for the survivors themselves, but there's a ton that are for the caregivers and for the whole. And I think that that's pretty much happened on all sides.
I think so. I think you're absolutely correct. Well, as I was afraid, in 30 minutes we haven't been able to discuss all of the issues that we'd like to. However, we've touched upon a number of issues that I'd just sort of like to spend a few minutes recapping. I think I heard correctly that both of these cancers are driven by the sex hormones. Both cancers lead to really serious intimacy issues. Both cancers lead to emotional issues. Both cancers have dreaded side effects. We have gone into those in previous programs, but not this one. We touched upon just briefly, and this needs to be an entirely separate program, survivorship. How do we deal with the issues of surviving cancer? We haven't touched upon overtreatment. Terry alluded to it, but that seems to be another issue that we have to deal with, is overtreatment. Other issues are cost factors, and then I know in the prostate cancer community as well as the breast cancer community, the treatment options themselves are overwhelming. There are a number of choices, and which choice to make is very, very difficult. And of course there are many other similarities as well as some differences. But the bottom line is a cancer is dangerous. It needs to be dealt with. It needs to be treated. And the patient needs to be treated and cared for. And tenderly and lovingly and supportingly moved along. Again, I'd like to just conclude by thanking our guests, Samantha, Al, Terry, and Meredith. And one final thing, we would like to hear from you, the members of the audience. We would love to know what you would like to hear more about. We'd love to get some feedback on our programs. You may contact us on our website. Go to info@mcfpc.org. And thank you very much.